Good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates. This will be episode 121, coming to you live on June 16th, 2026, day 108 of the Iran war, with $113,300,000,000 spent on the Iran war. And it's a nice, round, even, clean number because the Iran war tracker that I've been using online to track all of this has now officially stopped counting. They said it's been listed as a record and that the war is over, or that peace is on its way. So the Iran war cost tracker now is essentially saying it's done. They're not counting any more days. However, as I've warned on this channel now multiple times, a memorandum of understanding is not a peace deal, and there are still so many hurdles that President Donald Trump, the United States, and Iran for that matter, are going to have to jump through to achieve actual peace, which we will see unfold very likely over the next 2 months. Essentially what the MOU is setting up for. An extension of the ceasefire that was already extended before for 60 days will now be extended again for 60 days with an officially signed and stated agreement this time, rather than a gentleman's verbal agreement that we saw that was initiated somewhere around April 8th in the past. And so the Iran war cost ticker has maybe stopped counting it, but we will continue to count this. At least until Friday, and then we'll see what happens beyond that. Not because we don't want peace, this is actually great news that there is peace, but because I remain ever skeptical of just how this is all going to turn out. So maybe it's a better sign of peace coming, though, and it was kind of in some ways refreshing to go on the IranWarCostTicker.com and see that the count has stopped. That being said, however, there are some already hurdles being reported from major outlets like Axios, which so far, throughout all of Trump's term, Axios has become more and more reliable when it comes to this. And Axios is reporting that within the Trump administration, internally, the Trump administration, the CIA director, Jim Ratcliffe, has been warning President Donald Trump and other senior officials that U.S. intelligence has uncovered some evidence casting significant doubt on Iran's willingness in the future to accept nuclear concessions. As we all know, of course, Washington is seeking this. And basically what this is expressing here is, we went to war with Iran to end their nuclear program, to end the threat of nukes, or at least that's what we were told. And of course, we know that our own national intelligence, the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, had served President Donald Trump with an intelligence report indicating that Iran wasn't even close to developing a nuke. And we all know on this channel that Israel, being the Zionist pigs that they are obsessed with expansion. They're obsessed with the Greater Israel Project. So we do know that in truth, this war was about Israel. It's been admitted several times by several different politicians like Mike Johnson and Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and Trump himself at one point, at multiple points actually. So we know that right off the bat, this was never about nukes anyway. It was always about just serving Israel, cucking to Zionism, and basically doing what we needed to do as the goy that we are for Israel, dying for them as always, and spending billions, hundreds of billions of dollars spent. Plus the cost will add up to over $1 trillion just to do what we did, which was an abysmal failure anyway, by the way. All of this was a failure, and it's now all cost the average American around $2,000. You in chat spent $2,000 essentially of your own money on this war that has solved nothing, accomplished nothing, and hasn't made you better off. And it was all done in the name of Israel to possibly try to effect regime change, or at the very least weaken Iran, neither of which have happened. And now this Axios report is indicating that the CIA director is doubtful, alongside many within the Trump administration, that Iran will concede to anything when it comes to their nuclear program anyways, which we all know, or at least what we know from the leaks, Iran, and they've been consistent on this. I've been reporting on this being one of the terms of Iran now for weeks, if not months, because I've had access to this information sooner than anywhere else, which is again why you should subscribe and like the stream. We know Iran has been insistent from the start that their nuclear program would only be up for talks after the memorandum of understanding gets officially signed on Friday, and after the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's economy is dealt with as an issue first. In fact, for the longest time, this seemed to be one of the biggest holdups between the negotiations of the United States and Iran, with the U.S. insisting that it had the leverage over Iran to insist on the order of what we negotiate, and Iran insisting the opposite. We've now seen, of course, Trump has completely, totally gotten on his knees and surrendered to Iran. He is powerless, utterly in checkmate. Like I said, he would wind up. He must now surrender to Iran, and he must give in to all of their demands, which is what we're seeing. And that's why we have right now, as it stands, absolutely no details of this memorandum of understanding from the United States side, from Washington, or from within the Trump administration. If truly this was as good of a deal as Trump will want us to believe that it is, Trump wouldn't be able to contain himself. He would be talking about all of the benefits that this deal is going to bring to America, and talking about how we crushed Iran and defeated them with this MOU and this memorandum of understanding, and he would be exuberant about it. Caroline Levitt would be at the pulpit already discussing all of this, preaching to all of us about how amazing Trump is and how good of a deal this is, and going over the details. And that's not what we've seen. We've seen the opposite. We have seen Washington and the Trump administration not want to release any details, decline to release any of them, which is not how Trump has operated at all. Trump has been one of the first ones to tell us now 40 total times that peace was around the corner, and then explain to us what was happening. And now all of a sudden he goes radio silence, because this memorandum of understanding is a humiliating surrender of the United States to Iran. And that's exactly what it is. And that's how Trump has had to overcome the stalemate in negotiations, by surrendering, by saying, okay, Iran, we'll discuss the Strait of Hormuz first then. And what are your demands? Okay, we'll do this, this, and that. You want money to rebuild Iran? Okay, we'll give you that as well, in the form of $300 billion. And this is still not entirely confirmed, but as the days go on, more and more reports are coming out about this. More leaks are being put out. Iran is suggesting this. And what we've also seen line up within this administration, even including that of J.D. Vance himself, who was directly asked about the $300 billion that would be going towards Iran in the form of reparations to repair the damages sustained in Iran and Tehran specifically during February 28th. Vice President Vance not only did not deny that this was the possibility unfolding of $300 billion being sent to Iran, but he actually also went on to implicate or even insinuate that it was actually very possible, if Iran remained truthful and if Iran remained proper about the negotiations going forward and didn't pull any slick ones. So we are getting more confirmations much slower than normal for President Donald Trump, who claims to be the most transparent president of all time. And every time we do, we just understand the bigger picture in all of this being what I said from the start it was: a fruitless, meaningless war that was unwinnable. It was another forever foreign war in the Middle East, which it still is going to turn out that way. Don't even kid yourselves. You think America's done in the Middle East forever now? We'll be back. But as it stands right now, not only did we lose this, but we also have made Iran stronger. And now the CIA is concerned, because we've capitulated, and by we I mean Trump and the Pentagon, have capitulated to Iran now in desperation. Reports are coming out today that Trump was essentially forced to do this because of a combination of a couple of economic implications and barriers here that I've been reporting on this channel at length for a while. In a combination of the bonds market, always watch the treasury bonds when it comes to President Donald Trump. It's what I did during the China tariff war last year, and I was able to determine what Trump was doing then. It's how I predicted accurately ceasefires during this war back in April on this channel, days before they happened. It's how I predicted escalation, in fact, before it happened on this channel. It's why you all come here and subscribe and tell me how correct I am, or apologize for ever doubting me. And you especially like the stream by double tapping your phone screen or hitting the thumbs up button. It's the least you can do for somebody who's so correct and so intelligent like I am. But that's what you do. You look at the bonds market. It's what Trump always has his eye on. And in combination, the inflation, which I also very accurately predicted on this channel would rise again this month. In fact, I was actually inaccurate because I under predicted. I said inflation would come in at 4.1% for the May inflation report. And on June 10th, we got the May inflation report, and it showed it was actually at 4.2%, with the possibility of it hitting close to 6% for June when all is said and done. And so, in combination of these two major economic factors, though MAGA will tell you the stock market's better than ever, which it is, it's doing great, that doesn't matter, as it turns out, when it comes to the overall economy of America and the everyday cost of living for Americans, who will now be focusing more and more on their own wallets and pockets as we approach the midterms this year, which I also very accurately predicted day one of this war would be a massive time constraint for President Donald Trump and would be working against him faster than any constraint we could apply to Iran would. And so that should help you understand why we're in the position that we're in. And now that we've done this, and now that we've surrendered to Iran, and now that Iran is poised to become way more powerful in the future than it ever could have dreamed before February 28th and before all of this concluded, now the CIA is worried. Yeah, Iran may not honor the nuclear deal. We can't actually get anything out of them because they've been insisting from the start they wouldn't even address the topic until we address their economy in the Strait of Hormuz. And now we've agreed to do that, and we still can't get anything out of them, and we won't really know where their head's at until after we solve their problems for them with the Strait and with their economy. And this is ultimately what is being now stated to President Donald Trump in the form of a warning from the CIA Director Ratcliffe, as well as from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, who are reportedly also now sharing and expressing major concerns to President Donald Trump over the trustworthiness of Iran regarding their nuclear facility program. Now, conversely, the report goes on to state that, conversely, on the other side, we have Vice President J.D. Vance, along with, surprisingly, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who are arguing in favor of moving forward with the deal anyway. Now, it's actually not that shocking. Vice President Vance, as I've gone on to explain, I have many issues with him as a conservative. I will not be supporting him in 2028. He's big tech. He represents the AI surveillance state in the form of Palantir, as he's friends with and backed by Peter Thiel, to make long story short. But that being said, the one thing that is redeemable about Vice President J.D. Vance is his younger age. He's in the oldest bracket and oldest tier of millennials, the millennial demographic, which means he does by nature have Middle East fatigue like the rest of us, because he grew up during the Middle East forever wars of the 2000s, and he understands just how politically poisonous all of this has been for the GOP, for the Trump administration, how ruinous it's been for Trump's legacy. If anybody actually ironically understands that, it's J.D. Vance, who really hasn't been listened to at all. President Donald Trump, and seemingly from an outsider's perspective has actually almost been shunned for having this correct stance. But it's not shocking that Vance has been the one urging Trump to move forward towards peace. And it's even actually less shocking that the two Jewish Zionists, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, are also urging President Donald Trump to move forward with the peace deal. And in prior episodes, I won't go into great detail again, but I'll recap them. In prior episodes, if you've been tuning in for a while, you understand why that would be. Because the $300 billion reparation payout that Iran is set to receive, not directly from America, because we don't want to give the appearance of any money exchanging hands, because Trump wants to sell this not as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action 2.0, but he wants to sell it as something vastly superior to Obama's Iran nuclear deal. So we will not be seen directly giving or sending money over to Iran. That's a no-no. That's what Obama did, and that's why Trump insisted he had to rip up that deal and create a better one. Before, of course, not until after we bomb the fuck out of Iran and cause another stupid Middle East forever war that cost us now $113 billion plus dollars. So Trump won't be seen, or he won't allow America to be seen handing cash directly over to Iran. But nevertheless, this $300 billion will be funded by Qatar and other Persian Gulf allies. And essentially, it'll be through a chain kind of situation. But ultimately, it's going to be coming from us in some way, shape, or form. And the reason why the two Jewish Zionists, Steve Witkoff and Kushner, are urging Trump to move forward with peace, which you would not expect out of Jewish Zionists, is because, as I've explained in prior episodes, they are not just Jewish Zionists who hold no official title in the Trump administration, but have somehow found themselves in prominent negotiations in Islamabad between the U.S. and Iran. but they are real estate moguls. This is actually what they do. Real estate is their game. And what I've reported on and given great detail to in prior episodes is that it's actually going to be almost certainly Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff who will be assigned a lot of these real estate contracts and reconstruction contracts over in the Persian Gulf, over in Iran, once peace is established. And so a lot of this money is going to Iran to help them rebuild. And in addition to that, Kushner and Witkoff are going to find themselves profiting immensely off of this war that ultimately they were two of the biggest pushers for. You can go check that out on a prior episode. I did a great breakdown of that in the past, going into tremendous detail about the contracts, what's happening behind the scenes, where the money's coming from, what Kushner does, what his plans are for the Middle East, etc. But it's all now on the verge of playing out. So what you wouldn't expect out of them is now what they're pushing for, only because they stand to make a huge profit there in the region to essentially capitalize off of it in the real estate markets. And really what we're seeing unfold here is just another major dilemma, though, when it comes to Iran and their trustworthiness. Trump will be facing massive issues after this memorandum of understanding is signed, and this is what I've been warning about on this channel. Many people are taking this as a peace treaty. That it is not. In fact, a peace treaty, as Mark Levin so eloquently reminded us on his pathetic weekend show while he was raging out and crashing out over the concept of peace in the Middle East, a peace treaty will have to get two-thirds congressional support. It will actually have to go through Congress. Whereas this memorandum of understanding is more of, it's above a gentleman's agreement, which is what the original ceasefire agreed to on April 8th was between Trump and Iran. It's more above that. It's written in paper. There's concepts that are being drafted down on paper, and it's as I've eloquently expressed on this channel, it is an agreement to work on an agreement. Is essentially what this MOU is. So it's not the end. Friday will not be the end. Friday will not be guaranteed peace going forward. It's just going to be a recognition of a desire for peace, possibly if negotiations go well after Friday. All while now a 60-day, what I've called super ceasefire, will be in effect. And the reason why I call it a super ceasefire is because, again, if you've been a longtime viewer on my channel, you know how irked I am at the term ceasefire being thrown around all throughout the last 3.5 months, well, 2.5 months really, because it was in April, about a month after we started. All the while, we've been firing at Iran. They've been firing back. Israel's been blowing up Hezbollah, attacking Lebanon, leveling cities. Iran's been bombing Fujairah. They've been bombing oil industry locations. They've been attacking ships passing through the strait. We've sunk Iranian speedboats. Our squadron of naval destroyers was attacked by Iran. They shot down one of our F-15s, 2 of our Black Hawk helicopters. They shot down an Apache just literally last week or just over a week ago, all under a ceasefire. So in addition to that, this MOU is now a super ceasefire. Now they mean it. Now it's really, okay, no more shooting, I guess. And Trump's going to be facing a lot of dilemmas in this new atmosphere now after this memorandum of understanding is officially signed on Friday. Word on the street is it was already signed digitally on Monday. It'll be officially signed in ceremonious fashion on Friday, I think in Switzerland, by J.D. Vance, actually, it looks like. He's going to fly there and do it. But afterwards, Trump's struggles will just be beginning, really, because war is actually kind of the easy part if you have good strategy. It's actually diplomacy that's going to be the hardest part. And while they have a framework of a deal now that seems rather concrete to some degree, diplomacy, as I've harped on in the past, doesn't seem to be Trump or America's strong suit as of late, because we don't actually understand what diplomacy is, or at least we don't seem to. Here in America, for some reason, it seems like we have this idea that diplomacy is us showing up with a list of demands and then basically threatening to bomb the country if they don't give in to all of them. And that's not what diplomacy is. Diplomacy is supposed to be more of a salesmanship type of atmosphere where you are actually engaging in diplomacy as a skill that you craft and hone and engage in order to avoid making threats or going to war. And so, in true diplomacy, in true negotiations centered around the concept of diplomacy, you would never make a threat of war or of violent action, because the idea and the whole concept of diplomacy is, let's not go to war at all. Let's just work this out. And that doesn't seem to be something that America has understood for, I don't know, I would say since when? I mean, all throughout the 1900s and into the 2000s. I mean, we have not understood this concept for probably a good 150 years. And so his struggles are just going to be beginning when it comes to this. And with this CIA report indicating that Iran might not be all that trustworthy when it comes to their nuclear facility program, of which we have no guarantee from them one way or another what they will do or won't do for us, even after we solve their problems with the Strait of Hormuz and send them all of this money. We now understand, in addition to that, Trump will be lifting sanctions, at least temporarily, for the first 60 days, starting on Friday, off of Iran, to allow them to generate even more money in oil sales. And Trump will be doing this in part because, in truth, it will also help lower oil costs, which might actually get gas down lower than what I predicted it would originally come down by, because I didn't originally think we would ever actually give in to Iran in the way that Trump has decided to. I didn't think Trump would surrender so much to Iran when I made my prediction about gas prices staying high for so long. And so this is actually smart in the sense that lifting these sanctions off of Iran, which is an oil producing, oil rich company, and is responsible for a good chunk of oil in the global economy and the oil markets, will lower oil prices down for us as well, and for the rest of the world for that matter. And so it is smart in regards to that, but it also does, once again, allow Iran to fully capitalize off of their oil sales without U.S. sanctions in place, and at least for the first 60 days. Now, what we're also seeing is it could likely be a permanent lifting of sanctions. It seems like Iran is demanding that down the road, that all primary and secondary sanctions are permanently lifted off of them going forward in the future, even after the 60 days, which J.D. Vance, I believe, if memory serves correctly, also confirmed was a possibility, in addition to the $300 billion being sent to them for reconstruction purposes. Also, in addition to this, we've been told that assets will be unfrozen, at first immediately, in the form of $12 billion, just for basically allowing Trump the privilege of announcing the memorandum of understanding, and then upon signing, another $12 billion for $24 billion total. Beyond that, we'll likely be lifting additionally tens of billions of dollars more of frozen assets for Iran as well, which will be giving them access to a lot of purchases that they made in the past, and essentially value, monetary value, making them more powerful, really, is what's happening. And then the $300 billion real estate construction, and really also what we're also tending to overlook here, but I've reported on, is that as well as this, Iran seems dead set on charging some sort of fee for transit through the Strait of Hormuz. And nothing's going to stop that. I've already explained why. I already explained very accurately many months ago that the genie's out of the bottle on that, and it's going to create permanent changes in the global economy. It's going to create permanent changes when it comes to the Pax Americana, and it's really the genie out of the bottle, meaning Iran had a taste of it already. And they're not going to be able to unlive that experience or forget it or overlook the potential profits. And while we argue, of course, you cannot toll for international waters, Iran has seemingly developed or created some sort of narrative like loophole about this by expressing that it wouldn't be a toll, but rather it would be for environmental purposes, because Iran and the IRGC are saints, as it turns out, I guess, and they now all of a sudden are very bothered by the fact that anywhere between 80 to 130 cargo tankers and oil tankers pass through the strait every single day, which causes pollution and environmental damage. So Iran now wants to do what all good environmentalists do, and they want to charge people a lot of money, because that's how you save the environment. You tax everyone into oblivion. We all know that that's what works. And that's why global warming hasn't happened, thankfully, is because Democrats realized to save the planet, you just need to tax people a lot of money. Take the money. Doesn't matter what you do with it, just take their money. And that's how you stop environmental damage, and that's how you become an environmentalist, and that's how you save the planet. So now the IRGC is going to be doing this, and they're calling it an environmental fee, a management fee. And once again, what have we heard pushback wise from Washington or the Trump administration? Nothing, actually. They've said there won't be a toll. And this is kind of the language game that's being played right now in regards to this, because they know that herein lies the real obvious strategic defeat for America. If there's a situation where Iran is now charging anything for passage through the strait, it is a strategic loss for America. And I've explained the Pax Americana in the past, and I've explained the international maritime water laws and treaties signed by the United Nations after World War II and why this is prominent. I won't go into detail again, but it all ties in with that. And so all of this is playing out right now, and now the Trump administration is going to have to decide many things, really. One of them being, how trustworthy is Iran? What will Iran decide to do with this newfound power? This is a question we now have to ask ourselves. Because if all of this is true and all of this happens, what we are looking at, I see expand on maritime law, stay true. I've already done that on multiple episodes, so I'm not going to again, because my regular viewers will probably just roll their eyes. I've talked about it at length so much. You can look up some of my past live streams after this one ends, though. I have a lot of videos out there. But it is important for people to understand how significant maritime law is. The Freedom of Navigation Act. Start there if you want to do your own research on it. The international water laws, maritime laws, freedom of navigation. You can Google what's called the Pax Americana. And that's really the term people need to be more familiar with to understand how significant this is. It's essentially, I'll briefly explain it. Our Navy was beefed up intentionally after World War II to provide security and safety for all ships to transit all international waterways safely and freely. And in doing so, it allowed the global economy to springboard forward much more in growth and success than it would have without this, because pre-World War II, we were living in a world where these international waterways were charged tolls by all of these countries, and they were, they had pirate issues with pirates transiting the tolls and stopping ships and raiding them and stealing or charging money as well. And this is essentially what's at stake here, because if Iran gets away with this, other countries now will recognize that there is a massive hole in the Pax Americana. And if Iran gets the profit off of international waterways, then why wouldn't other countries want to do the same? And it could all quickly start to fall apart. That's a very 60-second long summary of it. Back on point here. Trump has to decide how trustworthy is Iran going forward, because we are making a deal with them. Trump is really surrendering to Iran for the most part. We may or may not get something out of this, but Trump is mostly surrendering to Iran, and in doing so, handing over all of this stuff that I just went over, which will make Iran very powerful. Within the next 3 to 5 years, Iran could look very different from a power standpoint, because of what they stand to gain in all of this, the amount of profit that they can make. Money is power. If sanctions are lifted off their oil, they're making more money on oil sales. If they charge a fee for the Strait of Hormuz, I've done the math on that, they would be making, if they split it with Oman, they'll make $50 billion extra per year on average. If they don't split it with Oman, they could make over $100 billion per year extra on average, based off of what they said they would toll for these ships. Of course, the unfreezing of their assets will help them a lot. The $300 billion will go a long way. And this is going to increase their power a lot. And really what you have to ask yourself is, and what Trump needs to ask himself after all of this is now said and done, why would Iran first of all, why would Iran agree? This is the question that really needs to be asked. Why would Iran agree to not move forward with their nuclear program now? This is actually what people need to really sober up and recognize here. And I've stated that this would be a potential problem in the future as well when it comes to Iran. We have done, if anything, we have actually done the opposite of de-incentivizing nuclear proliferation across the globe. This, if anything, has served as a primary example to all countries, friend and foe alike, that there is a lot of danger in the modern age of 2026 and beyond. There's a lot of danger in not being a nuclear power, because as it's been accurately expressed by other political commentators, by now I'm sure you've heard this narrative and rhetoric, I'll still say it, we wouldn't do this with North Korea. It wouldn't go down this way. We wouldn't try this with Russia. We wouldn't do it with China either. And that's because they're nuclear powers. And that's the ultimate deterrent. The only reason we did this with a country the size of Iran, with a 1.1 million soldier strong military, of which it's like four different split factions armed forces, but nevertheless equating to over 1.1 million total soldiers, a population of close to 93 million people, and a very large country that's oil rich, the old Persian Empire as it was. And the only reason we did this at Israel's behest was because we knew they didn't have nukes. Despite the narrative, Trump telling you that this was because they were developing nukes, we knew they didn't have them. And that's why we knew we could get away with doing it. And this has been such an obvious reality now that, as I've reported in the past, other countries have woken up even more to this reality. There's been reports that France and Poland have reached out to each other, and they've now begun discussing establishing nuclear facility programs of their own and working together to do that. They don't want to remain as countries without nukes now. They want to push forward and actually move into developing nukes for their own countries for security's sake. North Korea announced at the start of this war that this has inspired them to produce more nukes rather than less. Same with South Korea, for that matter. Other countries are jumping in on that messaging as well. And Iran, if anything, after now enduring what could be, and I say this even as a conservative, I'm not here to be biased, what could wind up being referred to as an illegal war. We'll have to see how that plays out in Congress in 2027. After Iran endured all of this seemingly unprovoked attack on them at the request of Israel, would you objectively, and I'm not here as an Iranian sympathizer, I'm just very good at placing myself in other people's shoes. It's what makes my analysis the cream of the crop, which is why you should subscribe right now to American Advocates for more content like this. Objectively speaking, without your emotions factoring into it, okay, Iran has pedophiles. Okay, Iran is a terrorist regime. Okay, the IRGC is gross. Okay, they're a threat to Israel if you even care. I get it. Remove your emotions and put yourself in their shoes objectively after enduring now 113 days of warfare with the world's hyperpower, as we were called, and now have proven we're probably not. And enduring also Israel being their neighbor. Would you be more inclined to agree to never proliferate nukes and never develop them and remain a nuclear warhead free country? Or do you think Moshtaba Khamenei, the son who's now the supreme leader, who lost his father, wife, and children in the explosion on February 28th, but he himself has remained alive, do you think maybe there's a chance that if anything, they would be incentivized to actually move forward towards nuclear development because they recognize how powerful of a deterrence it is? And this is the question Trump's going to have to ask, and it's the question pretty much everyone's going to wind up asking, including Iran probably. Their parliament will be discussing this, and I'm sure within their own military branches and the supreme leader, this is going to be a discussion across the globe now. Can we trust Iran? The answer obviously is no. I'm not here to tell you we can. We definitely cannot. They are liars, and they are manipulators, and we've seen them manipulate very well throughout the last 113 days, as I've explained in the past, their whole 5D chess game against Israel, where they've used Trump very effectively as a chess piece against Israel. And now we are seeing a massive divide between Trump and Netanyahu. But nevertheless, why would they not move forward on their nuclear program, especially as they're now set and poised to rise to power more? And what I really propose to you is this, or rather, why would they not play ball now? And then basically, here's my proposal: why would they not sneak their way back into developing nukes down the road? And that goes back to trust, because here's the other question or hypothesis I'll frame to you guys or pose to you guys right now, and that is, as I've explained in the past as well, Iran has discovered that they have been sitting on a very powerful weapon, in some cases perhaps even more powerful than nukes, and that is the Strait of Hormuz. And I've done a full breakdown. I've given you my analysis on this based off of what we've literally seen objectively. Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and they've demonstrated that they have enough force output to back up their threats of shutting down the strait. We saw the multiple tankers back in May or late April be struck by Iran, a South Korean tanker, a Japanese one, I believe. several other ones. One from the Emiratis. They struck Fujairah. They've struck at our squadron, our squadron of naval destroyers, though that doesn't appear to have been successful. They shot down the Apache helicopter just 2 weeks ago, not even. They shot down an F-15, two of our Black Hawks. They have demonstrated the capabilities through mining with the speedboats, through the speedboats themselves, through drone warfare, which America has been exposed as being painfully behind on, and through cheap ballistic missiles and land air cruise missiles and drones of all kinds, boat drones, etc. They've demonstrated that if they threaten to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, that they can do it. And if they do that, we now see the consequences of that. Unlike with a nuke, where you launch it at a country hypothetically and you take out an entire city and you cause a nuclear apocalypse that could end the world, and now every country on Earth literally hates you. With the Strait of Hormuz, you shut it down, and within days or weeks, the entire global economy is now at your mercy. Every single country that relies on their economy doing well and on the global economy, every single first and second world country is now brought to their knees. And you can make your demands, which is what we've seen Iran effectively do. And in doing so, they've discovered that the Strait of Hormuz really is their nuke. Now, I'm not saying that they will recognize this and accept this as the only thing that they need. But the reason why I bring this up and how I've analyzed that in the past, which is it's just the truth. The reason why I bring it up is there could be a scenario where, to appease Trump or to work towards peace, and so that they can stall out long enough and begin the process of rebuilding after these strikes, perhaps they just agree. Yeah, okay, we'll pause our nuclear facility program for 15 or 20 years. That's what America's pushing for currently. About 15 years is what I'm seeing. And yeah, perhaps they agree to that, right? But who's to say that 3 or 4 years from now, after they're rebuilt, after they've charged a toll, which is what it will be, they'll call it a fee, it'll be a toll, after they charge for the Strait of Hormuz and generate hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue, after they've sustained several years of lifted sanctions on their oil sales and profited even more and generated more wealth for themselves, increasing their GDP by an insane amount, and they've begun the process of emerging as a fourth global power. Who's to say at that point, from an even stronger position, they don't just renege on this and say, you know what? We're going to move forward on our nuclear program. It's been 4 years, and now that we're so powerful, try to stop us. Then what do we do? And so that's the question, and this is the actual issue here. And as I've mentioned in the past, if anything, they would be incentivized to do this. Yes, the Strait of Hormuz is a powerful weapon on display. It's been on display, but nothing really does beat a nuke. That is the ultimate fear. And that is, again, why we have nothing to do with North Korea. And even though we consider North Korea to be a despicable country the same way we consider Iran, we could easily discuss North Korea in the same context, actually, if you really examine the rhetoric and narratives being pushed out by our own country from the Trump administration. When we bombed Iran, Trump made it all about regime change. He made it all about liberation of the people residing there. We could say the same about North Korea. I think almost everybody would agree regime change in North Korea would be better for the world if we got the right leader in place to take the spot. I think we could all also agree the North Korean people are very oppressed. We would view what they live through as suffering every single day. They're put to death if they don't clap hard enough for Kim Jong. Literally, if you don't clap and smile hard enough, you're dead or in prison, eating corn and doing manual labor. And the bleeding heart conservatives, usually it's bleeding heart liberals, but you'll notice that the bleeding heart conservatives who are eager to carry on in their mental gymnastics of being able to support their Lord and Savior Donald Trump, they desperately they clinged on to this messaging from Trump. Oh, it's about the Persians, those poor Persians. But it all goes back to nukes. Because we could say that about North Korea, so why aren't we bombing the ever-living fuck out of North Korea? Because they have nukes. So we actually just turned a blind eye to North Korea, and we pretend none of that's happening, and if you hear about it, it's sad, and oh, I wish it weren't like that, but oh well. The narrative goes right out the window the second you realize a country has nukes, but when they don't, well, all of a sudden it's, well, we got to get regime change in there, we got to make sure they don't become a nuclear power, and we need liberation for the people. And then all of a sudden people care. So that's what I mean when I say Iran is incentivized to develop nukes, because if they do, If they do, this situation that they have now found themselves in for 113 days ceases to be a possible outcome in the future. It won't be a reality anymore. This won't happen again if they develop nukes. And that's why it's so important for this Trump administration to prepare for a reality. It's really important for America in general to prepare for a reality where likely the best case scenario is Iran agrees up front in the name of peace. Maybe if Trump's lucky, he finishes his entire term without Iran reneging on the agreement, as Iran just takes a step back, embraces their new economic power that they're developing when it comes to controlling the Strait of Hormuz and selling oil sanctions free. And then over the course of, like I said, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of generating all that money and building up their power, reestablishing their military, strengthening it, strengthening Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, which is exactly what they'll do with that extra money, by the way. They'll be sending that to their proxies. And after years of doing that and establishing themselves as a fourth emerging power, maybe then they just start developing nukes and dare us to come in and try to stop them. And this is a reality people have to be prepared for. So Trump finds himself in one of the weakest possible negotiating positions right now, and accepting the proposal that Iran's been proposing now for, well, since the start of the ceasefire, really, and that is discuss the strait first, and then maybe we'll talk about nukes later. While giving Iran everything, it's exactly where Trump finds himself in now. And then I wanted to discuss this as well, because not only does Trump have this tough choice to make regarding Iran, but in addition, he has another tough choice to make, very likely, and that's going to be basically centered around Israel. So if Iran does not break any deal, let's just say, and earnestly stays true to not developing nukes, what do we do about Israel and Hezbollah? This is another problem and issue that we can clearly see is really beginning to bother Trump, and it's been made an issue by Iran, actually. And that's why I've been explaining for weeks, since late March, or well, since April 8th, or there shortly thereafter, after the ceasefire was announced, after we began learning what Iran's terms would be in order for peace to be upheld and worked through. Iran has been pretty much from the start stipulating that Israel must be kept in check. Israel must stop advancing in Lebanon. Israel must stop striking Lebanon. Israel must pull out of Lebanon. Iran has been firm on that red line they've drawn. They've not budged from it. And miraculously, this week at least, they seem to be tolerant of Israel's warmongering attitude and actions, at least for this week. We don't know how long that tolerance and patience from Iran will last, though. And even just today, there was actually news coming in southern Lebanon. I actually have the news right. Where is that? Right here. Clashes were reported in southern Lebanon following new Israeli military advance attempts. Now, I don't need to go over the Greater Israel Project. Most people by now have heard what this is. Whether you believe it or not is not really my problem. If you choose to remain a stupid, inferior Goyim scumbag, that's your decision. I'll lead the horses to water, but I can't make them drink. But nevertheless, we all understand, I think, or people who at least embrace this and understand this, know why Israel's doing what they do. It's all about expansionism. It's all about the Greater Israel Project. And that's why the second we bombed Iran, Israel turned its focus onto not Iran with us, not to fight side by side with their greatest ally. Wow, what a pair, Israel and the United States. It's like a movie. My God, the IDF side by side with the Marines, with the Navy fighting Iran. No, Israel literally said, okay, thank you. You take care of Iran. We're going to go invade Lebanon now. You goy scum bitches. You fucking little goy scum maggots. Go fight and die for us as you should, you inferior scum beings. You lesser than scum. Good to see you finally step up and do your role. And so they've been doing that. And then when they sensed every time that peace was near, they ramped up their operations, taking more of Lebanon, bombing more of Lebanon, flattening Lebanon, combing through Lebanon with soldiers, airstriking more, all in the name of picking up the pace for expansionism, while simultaneously, of course, the dual benefit to Israel would be the possibility of sabotaging peace between the U.S. and Iran, because as I've stated probably 100 times on this channel over the last 113 days, Israel doesn't want peace. They don't thrive under peace. In fact, when this peace deal was announced, the Israeli stock market tanked cratered. And that's for a whole host of different reasons. But it is ironic that once peace is announced, Israel's economy all of a sudden isn't doing so well. And so they're not going to stop. Or really, what we have to ask ourselves is, more accurately, what happens if, and it's really not that big of a if with Israel, but what happens if Israel doesn't stop? What happens if Israel just continues to endlessly push the boundaries of Iran's red line when it comes to Lebanon and Hezbollah? Until Iran winds up inevitably citing that, okay, that's enough. The U.S. was supposed to control Israel under this memorandum of understanding. We gave it a chance. We overlooked a lot. And Israel's not stopping, and America can't control them clearly. You Zionist cucks. So we're out. The deal's off. Bombing will resume tomorrow. We've already seen Iran essentially do this. And it's begun to get to the point where it's infuriated Trump and made him angry at Israel. And that's why I've explained in the past again how Iran is playing the 5D chess game that everybody, all of the MAGA cultists who are absolute political 85 IQ chuds, have insisted Trump is playing. They want you to think Trump's playing 5D chess. This war was all about China all along. But as I see it and as I look at all the details, China's not suffering right now from this war. They don't care. They love and they find it amused how much of a pickle Trump is in. They find it amusing. Trump even admitted when he went to China and talked with Xi that Xi smiled when he brought up the Strait of Hormuz and began to laugh. So China's not hurting. Trump's not playing 5D chess. Iran is. And this is the brilliance of the game. It exposes Israel for what it is, which makes them less popular with other countries, with more Americans, and causes a divide that is clearly evident now between Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. And Israel has already stated, no matter what deal is worked out, what is signed on Friday, they don't care what it is, it won't apply to them. And they basically continue to cite this whole self-defense doctrine, meaning they must be able to defend themselves from Hezbollah, they say. And this is what Trump will have to basically do. He'll have to determine all this. He'll have to make some of the toughest choices, I think, of his entire term. I think we'll look back on these moments now coming up and what decisions Trump's going to have to make and recognize whether he does the right thing or the wrong thing here. These were some of the toughest choices because of the prior past precedents that have been imposed on other presidents of the United States. So to recap, some of the questions Trump's going to have to ask and decisions he'll have to make centered around that. First and foremost, do we trust Iran regarding nukes? I say no, of course we don't. But if not, what do we then do? And to that question, I don't think there are any good answers. I don't think there has been any good answers. The other question is, do we continue to support Israel if they continue to try to sabotage our peace efforts with Iran? And this, in my opinion, this question, the answer to this question, really is where there's a chance. There's a silver lining, possibly, in all of this that President Donald Trump could capitalize on in answering that specific question appropriately, if he has the balls to do it. Because where Trump has a chance to basically do the completely unexpected and save his presidential legacy even, perhaps, would be in reining in Israel and finally getting a hold of them and controlling them and reminding them that they're beneath us. Israel is beneath us. They're an inferior country, totally dependent on America. Without us, they're nothing. They do not exist without us. They do not remain sovereign without us. They do not start these wars without us. They don't win wars without us. And they don't defend themselves successfully without us. They are completely subservient to us, or at least they should be. They are a junior partner who should basically have almost no say in negotiations. We are Big Brother, we are their defender, and because they're dependent on us totally and utterly, they should have no say. And the fact that they're making the statements that they do publicly about this deal and saying, we won't abide by it, if they intend on following through on that, if next week hits and they're still bombing Lebanon and Iran is getting pissy and Iran is threatening to back out entirely, it will be upon Trump to make the ultimate choice. At that point, do we go to war with Iran and just choose to allow the parasite to lead the host? Or does Trump finally decide to man up, grab his balls, remind him that that they're there, and make the right choice. And in doing so, by that I mean no more funding, no more military support, no more weapons to Israel, no more protection. This is how you put Israel in its place. This is how you remind them that without us, they do not exist and they are nothing. This is how you remind them they're totally dependent on us. If Israel wants to continue bombing Lebanon and in doing so possibly sabotage peace between the U.S. and Iran, which by the way, the Zionists, the Republican cucks, I'm a conservative. I am a social and fiscal conservative. The reason why I sound like a liberal sometimes is because I'm critical of Zionist boomercons and neocons. Disgusting. I'm an America First conservative. And I want to throw that out there before I say this, because the reason why so many of the boomercons who worship their precious Israel and the Zionists and the old school Republicans and the neocons, the reason why they're so mad about peace right now is because the deal is bad for Israel. It's very bad. I just explained earlier how much more powerful Iran stands to become over the next 3 or 5 or 7 years with lifted sanctions on frozen assets and control of the Strait of Hormuz. And the more powerful Iran becomes, the more threatening they are to Israel, especially wherein it lies that they're more threatening to Israel's agenda, being Greater Israel, expanding. And you see, Iran's proxies kind of surround Israel. You have, whereas Hamas, sort of up in Turkey to some degree, around that region, where's Hezbollah? Just north of Israel in Lebanon. Where are the Houthis? Southeast of Israel in Yemen. Israel is surrounded by Iran's proxies, and the proxies aren't that strong, but they're strong enough. Iran is strong. And now with all that money, as I explained earlier, Iran will spread the wealth. They'll use that money to not just beef up their military and their defense and possibly push towards nukes anyways, I've explained, but Iran will also spread the money out to the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas, strengthening their allies, their proxies, and endangering Israel even more. And really, in doing so, preventing Israel even more from expanding like they believe is their right to do. And so that's why these boomercons and neocons hate peace. They hate this peace deal because it's bad for Israel. But that being said, the only thing that matters is America. And it's actually, though it's not great for America in many ways, as I've explained in prior episodes, it is the best possible outcome at this point. It's nonviolent. It doesn't resort to nukes. It doesn't resort to boots on the ground warfare. It doesn't resort to bombing runs in war, expensive war. It isn't Trump just completely backing out with nothing. He at least has the appearance of something. It's an agreement, and it's peace. And now maybe America can return to focusing on itself. So it is the most America first thing Trump could do now. The most America first thing he could have done was avoid this altogether. It's too late for that. So the most America first thing he could do now is make peace with Iran, focus on America, and leave the Persian Gulf region. Pull our troops out, keep them safe, and that's the end of it. And in doing so, that makes Israel even less safe, because without us having as much of a presence in the region, Israel feels like they're in even more danger. And so I say all of that to allow you to understand why Israel's doing what they do and why they want to sabotage this, but that's why they're doing it, and that's why there's a good chance they won't stop. And if they don't stop, they sabotage the peace. And if they sabotage the peace, America spends more of our treasure and probably at that point our blood. We sacrifice and shed our blood at that point for a war that doesn't benefit us at all. And that's why it'll be upon Trump to make the ultimate decision here. Put Israel back in their place. And the way you do that, objectively, I understand there's the carrot and the stick, the money, the funds, Miriam Adelson, the AIPAC lobby, which, say what you will about it. I understand there's the blackmail as well, right? I understand all of that. Some people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Marjorie Taylor Greene are hypothesizing that Trump is being threatened behind the scenes. He could be in a dire predicament, they insist. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but you certainly wouldn't rule that out ever when it comes to this. And so what you have to understand is, that aside, objectively, you put Israel in their place by disciplining them. They're like a child in all of this, throwing a tantrum right now. And right now, mom and dad, Iran and America are ignoring the tantrum, which is actually good because we can move towards peace. And both countries have this seemingly unspoken of understanding right now that, though it's sad for Lebanon, what Israel's doing is what they're doing, and it seems like both countries have almost recognized that for now. But Iran loves this red line because it allows them to humiliate Trump and punish Israel. And so that's the problem. At any point in time, Iran can basically pull the carpet out and say, you know what, Israel's doing what you promised us they wouldn't do or what we insisted they wouldn't do. We're done with this peace deal. So Trump must put them in this place and Israel in its place, and this is going to be the ultimate. This is going to be the ultimate choice Trump has to make here. And you put Israel in their place again by pulling all support. No more funding, no more foreign aid, no more military support, no more weapons to Israel, and no more protection, including our defensive THAAD systems. And then in addition to that, if it gets bad enough, impose sanctions or tariffs on Israel. Just tariff their economy, which miraculously seemed to perform even better over the last couple of months. It's almost as if Israel profits off of war in every single way, with their shekel somehow doing better during war, and with their inflation dropping in the month of March while ours skyrocketed by 0.8%. Tariff their economy then. But this is what Trump will have to do, and that's how you put Israel in its place. And in doing so, you would force them to stop because they are nothing without the United States. But will Trump do it, is the question. And that's the ultimate dilemma here, and time will tell. Because maybe Israel does stop. To avoid all of this, maybe Israel stops altogether. It would be a miracle, but maybe they do. And maybe Iran agrees that they actually won't work towards nuclear warheads for 15 years. But both of those scenarios, I think, are highly doable. In fact, also, by the way, and this leads me to the next story I wanted to discuss today. Israel knows that they're nothing without the United States, and that's why what we're seeing here, there's more news to discuss today centered around our National Defense Act for 2027. And I'm going to get into that in a few seconds here, but first be sure to like the stream if you haven't already, double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button, and subscribe to American Advocates if you enjoyed what I've been talking about thus far, if you enjoyed the analysis thus far. If you enjoyed the reporting thus far, be sure to subscribe for more content like that. I go live every single night, Sunday through Friday, and oftentimes Saturday too. Also, be sure to turn on post notifications if you do subscribe so you're notified every time I go live. I try to go live around 10 p.m. Eastern, but I'm late oftentimes because I do a lot of research and reading. So, that being said, what I want to discuss here is Israel knows they're nothing without America. And really, the possibility of tariffing their economy to punish them, pulling military support, not providing protection for them anymore, ending funding and foreign aid, which is perhaps the biggest talking point in all of this, no more military support. The possibility of that frightens Israel as it is, let alone the possibility of that being a reality for them after this abysmal failure of an attack on Iran has commenced and now ended, where we did not achieve any of the goals that Israel wanted. The regime was decapitated but still is intact, filled with even more rigid hardliners that are younger and even more likely anti-Israel now. We don't even have their enriched uranium yet. We don't know if we'll get it. We might settle for them diluting it. At best, we don't know what they'll agree to or not with their nuclear facility program. And like I've explained now several times throughout this live stream, they're going to get wealthier over the next 3, 5, and 7 years. And so we didn't accomplish anything that Israel wanted. They're not weaker, and the regime is still intact. And now a threat like that, under those circumstances, would be frightening above all else to Israel. So what we're seeing now is Israel recognizing the reality of the future, with young millennials, Gen Z, finding Israel to be more unpopular than ever. Millennials only support Israel by 24%, Gen Z by only 16%, Gen X by, 38%, and even the boomers, who overwhelmingly support Israel, Israel's lost 9% support with the boomer demographic in America. Israel's losing support with entire countries, and with America, which is their most important special ally. So they see the writing on the wall, and they know what the future is. The future is less or no foreign aid for them whatsoever once Congress is actually filled up with young people, once the boomer cons are replaced. And by not even boomer cons, I should say boomers, because the Democrats are just as bad about this, and they've been just as bad about this. Once the boomers are out of Congress and it's all young people, Israel knows that this is the future. The foreign aid will dwindle down. It'll either be restricted, or they'll be given less and less of it, or it could just be cut altogether, and possibly even very quickly. And that's a huge problem for Israel. So what I want to discuss today is centered around some of the latest news with the 2027 National Defense Act and another act that will tie in with that. Now, I've done some reporting on the 2027 National Defense Act already, Section 224. We're going to recap that a little bit before I move into the latest update on this. The latest update being Tom Cotton, who's now pushing even more integration between Israel and the United States. A new section actually has popped up, that Tom Cotton is advocating for. But first, I do want to recap Section 224 of the 2027 National Defense Act, if you're not familiar with it. This Section 224 went viral the other week. I reported on it live here on this channel to give you guys some of the details that I didn't hear reported pretty much anywhere else. And in summary, what Section 224 of the 2027 NDAA is proposing is that the U.S.-Israel Defense Technology, it's called the U.S.-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative. And it's of what's called the U.S.-Israel Futures Act. Futures is in all capitals. And this initiative will force current and future secretaries of war. This is in my opinion the most troubling part right here. And this is where it umbrellas down underneath all of that. It will start by first and foremost forcing future secretaries of war or defense, whatever the department winds up being called after Trump, to appoint a single executive agent in the Pentagon who would literally be acting as a specially appointed Israel-minded, Israel-first czar, second only to the Secretary of War in power in the Pentagon. And in this position, he would then be tasked with the ultimate task of bypassing all other chains of command in the Pentagon, all other offices that are associated with inspections, national security, checks and balances, etc. He would bypass all of that in order to speed up the process of Israeli integration into our U.S. military, which is ultimately what Section 224 of the NDAA is proposing and pushing for. And in that's why the czar would be appointed to fast track this, because again, time is of the essence. Congress is getting younger. The boomers are dying off, and Israel knows it. So not only do they need to now show their true face because of how fast they have to move, but they have to move even faster than that. And in doing so, exposes themselves more and more. And that's what this bill is pushing for. Now, under this Israel First czar, who would oversee the setup of U.S.-based factories that would begin making the Israeli-designed gear that would be integrated into our military technology here in the United States, this czar would also then be tasked with ensuring that the joint ventures and licensing deals centered around the production of all of this are locked into our supply chain permanently. We will have no other direction to go. And in doing so, we will become completely dependent on Israel for our U.S. military technology. And by the way, the technologies that would be affected span across virtually everything that our U.S. military uses. Virtually all AI systems, quantum computing, all autonomous systems, our cyber and electronic war systems, our directed energy weapons, which is newer tech to some degree, counter drone strike tech, missile defense systems and tech, biotechnology, and data fusion, all part of the deal. All would be subject to Israeli integration. All of it. And the appointed Israeli first czar, working directly under the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War, would be fast-tracking this process in every department very quickly. And that's what Section 224 is pushing for. The obvious strategy behind all of this, of course, is to permanently integrate Israel into its host. Some people have compared this to sort of a marriage. I actually think that's being too generous, because you can always divorce. Though, of course, I don't even believe in divorce, but just to state facts here. People say it's Israel marrying the whore of Babylon that we are. We are their whore, and they're marrying us. That's how people compare it. Endearingly, I understand where they're coming from, but marriage can end in divorce. This is like the host burying so deep that now you can't just pluck it out. You can't pull out the parasite. Now you have to go through some insane procedural surgery that would last 12 hours, proverbially. All of this is an analogy, of course. And that's what they're doing. The growing fracture between young and old generations with the youth despising Israel is troubling to the Zionist, and the writing's on the wall. It's inevitable. And so this, if Section 224 of the 2027 NDAA is passed, and all of this Israeli tech is now integrated into our military, and possibly has been integrated into our military for years, or what have you, decades perhaps, with U.S. factories also now relying on Israel to continue producing our tech as well, by the way, because they want to dig into our supply chains, and they want to control the licensing. We will no longer be able to just opt out then and divorce Israel and basically say, you know what, no more foreign aid for you. We don't like the way you're acting in Lebanon, Israel. No more foreign aid for you. No more military support for you. In fact, we're going to tariff your economy. That's no longer an option. We'll be totally dependent on Israel for our military in general. All the power we can project as the United States with our military will be totally dependent on Israel if Section 224 of the NDAA is passed. And if you've ever wanted to see why I call out the boomers, the boomer cons and the neocons, if you've ever wanted to look for the best possible example of what I refer to as boomer con Zionist cuckery, this is it right here. Because this is not only totally unnecessary, we don't need Israel for this at all, but it is complete self-cucking to an inferior, less powerful country that's actually dependent on us. There's no rhyme or reason, and this is a foreign country, mind you, that's not part of NATO, with no real actual official alliance on paper between. This is what it looks like to sit in the cuck chair, and that's what our politicians are doing. This is it. This is Zionist cuckery. This is America being the extension of Europe that it is. This is the Europeans doing what they've sadly done best, creating their own enemy. And it's already bad enough and treasonous enough that all of Congress is pushing for this to pass. In fact, it's already passed the House. It's already passed the House. It got enough support. Section 224 of the NDAA passed the House. But where we really should be at here is looking at all of these politicians in our country in Congress supporting this, openly voting for it outright, passing it, the people who drafted the legislation, whoever they may be. I need to research that, and I will get back to you on names. We should be looking at that, and we should be understanding how treasonous this is, and we should be taking the names of all of those who drafted this legislation at the very least, and I would say even those who voted for it, and we should be arresting them and putting them in prison, and maybe even putting them to death for treason. That's what we should be doing as a country over this. This should make you sick. But it gets even worse than that, and that's what I wanted to discuss today, centered around Tom Cotton. What we are literally seeing now is today, Tom Cotton, news broke today, Tom Cotton is a disciple of Bill Kristol, by the way, and that's Kristol spelled Kristol. Look him up sometime. Give that a good read. If you've ever hated, if you're a conservative and you can't relate to your own party, like me, for instance, you can't relate to the Republicans, especially the Bush-era Republicans that somehow sadly has spread in sickness form to the Trump administration 2.0. If that's you and you guys neoconservatism, look into Bill Kristol sometime. He was a prominent writer for the neoconservative movement, and he discipled Tom Cotton. And now Tom Cotton, who's a recipient of $1.3 million plus in AIPAC funding during his political career as a Republican and neocon himself, is pushing for even more Israeli-American integration. Not only do we now have Section 224 of the NDAA passing the House and becoming a major threat as it moves through the chambers of Congress, integrating the Israeli tech with our military, and basically the parasite attaching to the host forever with that. But Tom Cotton has basically said, you know what? It's not enough. We need more integration with Israel. And Section 622 of the Senate Intelligence Authorization Act for the fiscal year of 2027 is now being pushed by Tom Cotton. And this bill will literally amend, that's a strong word, take note of it. It will amend the National Security Act of 1947 to force President Donald Trump and all other presidents in the future to expand and enhance intelligence sharing with Israel across every topic regarding the Middle East. And Tom Cotton's pushing for this right now. And really, this one makes the most sense. Even more sense than for reasons I explained why 224 of the NDAA makes sense. Think about this. When you listen to the main gripes currently coming out of Israel from Israeli nationalists, senior Israeli officials, I think Benjamin Netanyahu himself to some degree, or at least people in his office, the main gripes over Trump's current memorandum of understanding, the peace deal being worked out between the US and Iran currently, Israel is pissed because now the details have been leaked. But before that, we started to see them complain because they felt like they were being left out of the discussion, as any junior partner probably should be, especially one that's shown a real inclination towards sabotaging those deals and inciting violence in the Middle East and antagonizing their neighbors. But they were complaining, and they said, I can't believe this. Trump has betrayed us. He won't even tell us what the deals are. And I reported on how Ben Shapiro the other day, for instance, Mr. Israel First himself, the new face of MAGA, which is why I'm a conservative and not part of the MAGA cult. It's disgusting. But Ben Shapiro the other day even said that too. He tweeted it, in fact, and he said, like an angry girlfriend. Some of you guys in chat will relate to this. When your bitch is angry at you, she'll start typing in short sentences. And Ben Shapiro did that on Twitter over this MOU. He said, the nice thing about deals is that you can just openly discuss them, period. So release the details of the MOU, period. Now, period. I'm not kidding you. That's an actual tweet from Ben Shapiro. But they want to know, and they hate when they're not being told and informed, and when we're not sharing our intelligence with them. And why? It's because Israel wants to feel like they're in control. And if they don't know certain details, they can't take full control. If we leave them in the dark, then they can't predict what to do next, oftentimes predicting that sabotage is the answer. This is what they do. They have their spies, they're engaged in espionage, they find out what we're going to do or when something's going to happen, and if they don't like it, they do their best to be a hindrance to that plan by any means necessary. And that's what they've been complaining about. So recognize now, if Section 622 passes, they'll never really have that problem again. In fact, Section 622 of, once again, the Senate Intelligence Authorization Act that Tom Cotton is pushing for goes even harder in some ways than Section 224 of the NDAA. Because not only does it propose this idea of integration of intelligence between the United States and Israel, meaning, of course, we'd be blending predominantly the CIA and Mossad, but in addition to that, Section 622 of the Senate Intelligence Authorization Act also proposes that it will be illegal to intentionally reduce, limit, or restrict the sharing of our U.S. intel with Israel, unless the president himself personally certifies these restrictions. And then Section 622 of this act not only says it's illegal to restrict intel to Israel, but it says the president must personally certify that restriction, and it places standards on the president. And it says the president, in doing this, must also cite specific and identifiable national security concerns that would justify his certified restriction of intel to Israel. And he must report back to Congress within 15 days after a full impact assessment. Now you can see why, by the way, the Pentagon just about 2 weeks ago leaked that report the other week about how Israel's spying and espionage is now a top level threat to the United States. This is all unfolding right now in our own political system. And this is why I say Trump has the opportunity to save his legacy and make a full comeback. But he has to take the right stance against Israel. And this is what's happening right now. This is a fork in the road, in my opinion. Some of these decisions, nothing would be permanent, but the integration of Israel into our military would be so woven in that the answer would no longer be simple. And it would take years to undo all of that. Years. And the longer it goes on, the worse that is. Not to mention, when it comes to Israeli tech, are we all forgetting about the pager incident? Are these people trustworthy? Why do we want their tech integrated in our military? What implications do you think that could have for the United States down the line? And then the gall to propose this idea that it would be not only mandatory to share all of our intelligence with a foreign country. I can't emphasize that enough. A foreign country. We wouldn't even do this with Britain. In fact, when the idea was proposed in the past that we began sharing some intelligence with Britain and MI6 or whatever it was then, our country responded, our politicians responded with outrage. The Declaration of Independence wasn't signed for nothing, you know. Pretty much was the argument. But now when it comes to Israel, it's not an American colony. It's not an American territory. It's not an American state. It's not an extension of America at all. It's not part of NATO even. And now they have, in this bill, there's the gall of mandatory sharing of all of our intelligence with them. And in addition to that, then they want to also say it would be illegal to restrict it. And this is where we're at right now as a country. It should be more evident and obvious than ever just how occupied our American political system is by Zionist pigs. The usury that's been going on, the quality of life here in America as we watch our country descend into a third world nation. That's the path that we're on. We're in immigration hell. No border wall, our roads suck, our cost of living's high, housing market is unattainable for the youth. All of it echoes the German Weimar period of the 1920s. And we all know what followed in the 1930s. And he's on his way. And I don't think we actually want that. I don't. There's certainly parts of it that are more and more understandable when you read history. A lot of it's very understandable, actually. But the end result of all of that, we don't actually want. But if the problem is not addressed now, then that's what it leads to in every single case. History literally repeats itself over and over again. And they always call themselves the victims afterwards, but we're living through it right now, so we are able to understand just how much of a antagonizer or how much of a suspect or how not a victim these people really are. But it is playing out now, and there's an ultimate choice that's going to be made. Trump's probably not the guy for the job. He's 80 years old now. And clearly he's been purchased, compromised, blackmailed, threatened, whatever you want to say, by these people. But he has a chance. If he cares about his legacy at all, he has the chance. And I hate to say that it's coming down to what he decides, but it could. So that's what I wanted to report on, because a lot of this is major news. And really, like I said, we are in the fork in the road right now. And ultimately, by the way, the reason why this is happening is because what I've done, how I've explained here. Hang on a second here. We got to ban this guy here. Boom. Goodbye. Ultimately, what we have to recognize is there is a fork in the road, but the path's been chosen. And I've explained why with the youth. The youth have already made up their mind, and that's the writing on the wall Israel sees, the Zionists, really, the Israeli government, the Zionists. They see the writing on the wall. They know which path will be chosen, so they're doing their best to ensure that it doesn't matter. And that's what's the most infuriating. Otherwise, other than that, that's really all I've got to say about that. Please be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button, and subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. I go live every single night, Sunday through Friday, and most of the time on Saturdays too. I really go live every day. around 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, sometimes a little late, like tonight. But I would appreciate that, and I'll take a look at a few of your guys' chats too. See if anybody's got anything good to say about this. The Ghost 44 says, I'm at work. I can't catch the stream, but I'll catch the replay. I appreciate that, man. Hey, after you watch the replay, then be sure to leave a comment down underneath it. I'll respond to you on it. Just want to know what your thoughts are on it then. But have a safe night at work, and appreciate you stopping in nonetheless. Kitty Gold 5081. You seem kind of new. New username here. Don't recognize you. Kitty Gold says this is why Trump needs to leave the presidential office and take all his elective officials with him. Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of a pipe dream. And who would replace him? You know, that's the even bigger question. There's really nobody suitable anyway. You know, I think we've been a republic for quite a while, and you know how the saying goes: once you lose a republic, you can't get it back. And so I think that's part of the problem, actually. And you know, I don't even know what to call us anymore, which is sad. But I agree in sentiment with you. America was supposed to be a republic, and it was at least founded as one. Expand on the Bank of International Settlements. Oh man, that would have to be for a different day. Things could have been worse. We could have elected a drunk hyena. I don't know if it would have been worse, but it wouldn't have been. It probably would have been worse. You know, it would have been worse in more ways, probably, yeah. You know, I mean, she's an idiot, right? So, you know, it's almost, in some ways, it's almost worse with Trump. Hate to say it, because we were promised a lot, and we haven't gotten any of it. And now what's happening is the GOP is really going to suffer as a result of this. This is major credibility loss for the GOP. And, you know, there's silver linings in all of this, of course. I think it's galvanizing the youth more and more, which is good because we can rise up and take back control of the Conservative Party and turn it back into what it's supposed to be. But that's going to take some time. And in the meantime now, we are watching, sadly, its destruction from within. So, how long until Xi goes after Taiwan after seeing this mess? I don't know, you know? That's a good question. And Trump's narrative after coming back from China was very interesting on that, where he said he was about to call it a country and he stopped himself and he called it a place and then literally expanded on that and said, because nobody knows what to call it. Well, I think they want to be called a country, but okay. And that is a good question. I don't even have an answer to it. Wouldn't be surprised if it happens soon. Although I will say this though, David, and this is a tangent that I've gone off on with people in my personal life, so I'll say it here too. China taking Taiwan is a possibility, but how would they do it, first of all? And second of all, would they do it based off of how they operate currently? Because the one thing you'll notice about China, though they have a lot of problems, and I think they're blown out of proportion with how powerful they are. They're certainly an emerging power. They're certainly one of the top 3 power players in the world currently, alongside Russia and America. And they certainly could be a big threat to us if we're not careful. They probably currently are a threat to us if we're not careful. But I think they're blown out of proportion a little bit. That being said, what people need to understand about China is they don't really wage war. They don't really do what, for instance, Trump has decided to do on America's behalf in the Middle East. They don't get involved, and for the reasons of how this has played out, that's why China doesn't do this. Because nowadays, war is so different. And really, what China also recognizes is a winning strategy in how they've chosen to proceed as a third power player in the world. And in some ways, they're actually taking a lot of pages out of the American playbook of the mid-1800s and late 1800s during the Industrial Revolution. And they're doing it in their own unique way, because they're still kind of conquering countries, but they're doing it without firing a single shot. They're ensnaring these countries in debt traps, like what we saw in Venezuela before Trump intervened, which is why I supported the Trump-Venezuela operation. Because when you actually have geopolitical knowledge, you understand why that was actually a good operation, because China was too heavily involved in Venezuela, and that's in our Western Hemisphere. And I'm a Monroe Doctrine guy. I like the Monroe Doctrine, and I believe our foreign policy should be the Western Hemisphere and really not much else. And by doing what Trump did in Venezuela, we've now taken control of the country, and we can purge Chinese influence in that country where China had conquered Venezuela without firing a single bullet. And they do this by buying up countries' debts and then essentially enslaving them. And it's smart. But beyond that, what China's doing, or at least trying to do, and they're having a hard time, and for a lot of reasons. But what they're trying to do is what America did in the mid and late 1800s, which is really internalize and focus on your own manufacturing, supply chains, domestic issues, and economy. America did not become a superpower by conquering the world like so many other emperors have tried to do. We didn't have Alexander the Great as our president in the early 1800s who spread America's borders far and wide and made us into a superpower. We actually did kind of the opposite. We drafted the Monroe Doctrine in the early 1800s, written by James Monroe. After the Barbary Coast was over, we recognized that it's probably for the best that America utilizes both oceans to its advantage and focuses on itself, takes advantage of what would be the Industrial Revolution, and takes advantage of that and produces an incredible economy, and thereby produces the most desirable marketplace in the free world for all other countries to want to buy and sell in. And that's what made us rich. And in making us rich, made us powerful. And so in some ways, China has taken some pages out of that playbook by not engaging in fruitless, senseless, stupid wars, and by instead just enslaving countries with their own debt, basically. China is not spending Chinese blood or really too much treasure. Up front, they may buy the debt, but they profit off of it in the long run. And then they're trying to build up their economy, which we helped jumpstart for them tremendously so in the late 80s and 90s and 2000s by basically handing them all of our manufacturing. Isn't that wonderful? So once again, in true European fashion, we create our own enemies there too, by giving them everything they need to combat us. And that's what we've done. We jump-started their economy, and they've capitalized off of it, stealing our IP, building factories of their own, producing their own stuff, etc. And they're trying to build up their economy, and they plan on beating America, and in their mind, they will beat us economically. And that's what you have to recognize. And this is where America's making its biggest mistakes. And it's not because America lacks intelligent people. It's not even because Trump's an idiot. Trump has been stupid, but Trump is influenced by Zionism. There's no way Trump didn't recognize that this war was stupid. He did it anyway, is the problem. It's not about lacking in intelligence or strategy. It's really about the influence. It's about who's driving the train. And it's not America. We are occupied. And therefore, all of the decisions made in this country by our elected representatives collectively are made against our own interest, because this country is occupied by another country that wants its interest put first. And that's the difference. Because if it weren't for that, Trump ran on the golden age, and Trump ran on some good policies economically. He doesn't bother with them right now because he can't. He's distracted, and he can't afford to care right now. Now he's in a mess, and he has to get out of it. Miami pushed to the limit. Oh my gosh, folks are so focused on manufacturing. We are a first world country. Move on. That's not how the world works, Miami. I don't know if you were here for the history lesson that I just gave, but that's not how the world works. That whole argument of being a first world country, we can just buy everything we need from other countries, is foolish. How did that work? Not that I agree with anything that happened during COVID, but how did that work as an objective example when we approached China and said, hey, you're making a lot of our medical stuff, and we could use those supplies right about now? What did China do when it was a global crisis? The first thing China did was said, fuck you. No, we're not giving you anything. It's for the Chinese people. Now, COVID was stupid anyway, but still, that's a lesson there that should be learned no matter how you feel about it, and that's what China did. So understand that. Yeah, there's a lot of problems. America needs to be able to self-sustain, and there's a lot of issues we'd have in doing that if we needed to today. Yeah, exactly, Cooper. Yeah, blockading Taiwan would be how they would do it. Yes, that's exactly right. But blockading them, some form of economic warfare on them beyond the blockade, even deals where they buy up stuff in Taiwan or, etc. That is exactly how they would do it. Kevin Harm says when a country loses its manufacturing base, you have nothing. Correct. They gave us COVID. Yeah, that's so true. They gave it to us, and then they denied us the stuff that we didn't really. I don't believe we needed it anyway, but it's an objective lesson, is the point why I brought it up. They gave us the COVID, and then when we asked them for the medical stuff, they said no. No. We produced that for you up until now. You've been useful to us until now. I don't think Trump managed to damage the Chinese economy in this war, says Guy 5767. And if he did, it's inconsequential. I'm not saying the Chinese economy is suffering because of this war. It's just not doing so hot for a whole host of different reasons. Some of them are historic, really. Like China's birth control thing, where it's one kid per family. China's having issues with their population now. They're having issues with pollution, population density, the jobs markets. Just last year, they were going through the equivalent of our 2007 housing market crash. So they are having massive issues still, but their thinking is developing in the right direction, objectively speaking, for their long-term benefit economically, and that's a big problem, or potentially is one. But as far as hurting their economy during this war, I think you're mostly right. No country is better off because of this war. So China is hurt because of this in that sense, but it's not the 5D chess game that the MAGA cultists want it to be. We didn't cripple China because of this. They're not that concerned, I can assure you. Lifeguard, my moderator, says, I have the dark horse Republican candidate, Dana White. I don't know about that one. I actually, yeah. All right, we'll go with that for now, just so we have a name to throw out there, because that's everybody's major objection to that, right? Well, who will it be? Who will it be if it's not J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio? Okay, it's going to be Dana White. That's who it's going to be from here forward. It's Dana White now. Hey, Spartacus, good to see you, man. He's saying hi to Lifeguard. Michael Cox says Wuhan Labs, has China paid for America's small businesses closed? No, they would never do that. Mom and pop stores? No, they're getting richer. Yep. Fauci funded 120 labs around the world producing experiments that created tuberculosis, Ebola, and a few other COVID and pathogens. Yeah. Yep, and then Biden pardoned him before he left office, and now the Trump administration doesn't seem interested in going after him, unfortunately. Oprah? What about Oprah? Well, yeah, David, that is true. Our government was covering for China. Yeah, they didn't like Trump's narrative in the first term, and the Biden administration did their best to cover it. And then that's what bothers me so much about seeing somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, at the Freedom 250 event. There was a photo where or a video where he's walking behind Trump's seating in the front row of the UFC event on the White House lawn, and he grabs Trump's shoulder, and Trump turns around and smiles, and they're shaking hands, and he's patting Trump on the shoulder, and it's like, are we forgetting who Mark Zuckerberg was and what we saw Facebook do during COVID and during the presidential elections? It's literally fact that they were suppressing content, censoring people, and politically they were suppressing content that was beneficial to Trump. And now you're friends with this guy? He's attending the event? Why? And it just goes to show you once again how compromised Trump is. That is not what I should be seeing. I shouldn't be seeing anything to do with Mark Zuckerberg at the White House during a Trump administration. And it made me sick to see that. Exactly, Miami. That's true. Trump's never met a billionaire he didn't like. This is mostly true. Maybe not Mark Cuban though. But even then, I'm sure given enough time, he would want Mark Cuban because Trump's biggest weakness, one of them is he wants people who don't like him to come around. It's one of his biggest flaws. You can see this all the time because at this point the pattern is obvious with both his first and second term out of the way, and it's even become a joke internally. If you're a friend of Trump and you supported him and helped him out to reach the level of success that he has, he turns on you. He did it with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Alex Jones this year. And instead, who did he embrace? Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro and Laura Loomer. And these people, especially Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, were literally never Trumpers. And now that peace is on the horizon with Iran and the U.S., now Mark Levin is criticizing him, and Ben Shapiro is saying he's doing stupid stuff. They turned on him. But Trump wants to win over the people desperately who didn't like him from the start. It's the biggest flaw I think Trump has as a person. Hey, good to see Adamonicus in here. He says, I'm interested to see the revolutions in Ireland. Yeah, the protests in the UK, Italy, and others. Yeah, it's about time white people finally, develop some boundaries here and decide a line has been crossed. Potential influence to remind Americans it's about not tolerating wicked policies regardless of party. Yeah, yeah. I hate to be a doomer about that, but it's always America where you find the most braggadocious people about how many guns they own, and that won't happen here because if it does, you'll see a bunch of people storm the streets. Really? Where's that happening? Where are the American patriots storming the streets over the denial of the other half of the Epstein files not being released? Where are the American patriots storming the streets over everything I just covered today about Israeli foreign country integration into our military? Oh, that's right. The guns are under their beds, and instead they're in the New York City streets rioting and burning cars over the New York Knicks winning. Hate to break it to you, but in my opinion, if I'm going to go all doomer pilled on everybody here, in my opinion, America doesn't die or end with explosions and with all kinds of war. Patriots don't go out fighting. I think America, if it's to end, goes out with a sad, pathetic little whimper. I really do. But good on the Irish, that's for sure. Makes me proud to have some Irish genes in me. David Cooper, Americans are too lazy and comfortable. Yep, that's true. Americans will accept slavery. They will. I mean, not outright, but over time, we're going to be, the vast majority of us will wind up probably in some form of serfdom, slavery type scenario to AI data centers, machines, etc. You'll receive your universal basic income check that you'll be locked into receiving, which will be will be worth less and less because the government won't be generating the same money from people, and they'll be forced to pay people just to survive. And you'll be locked in to the peasant wealth class. And where will the uprising be? Well, it will only possibly happen if everybody is starving and homeless. I thought he had Scottish ancestry. I actually don't have Scottish ancestry. I don't think I'm Irish, British, and German. A little Polish too, I think. Thank you. Stop everything. $2 super chat tariff from Michael Cox. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that a lot. Seriously. People will wake up. It's already started. Yeah, and I don't mean to go full doomer pill exile. I do believe there is a collective human consciousness centered around like AI, for instance. You're seeing a lot of moratoriums. You're seeing a lot of people resisting the data centers specifically, which is encouraging. But you have to realize that the resistance level where it's currently at is not enough. It's not enough. Data centers are still being built. Moratoriums will only last for 1 to 3 years. And then what? What would you do as an American if you don't want a data center being built in your town and they say, too bad, we're building it anyway? What would you do? In truth, don't give me the American, I'll grab my gun and I'll stand where they're trying to build it and I'll stand in place and I'll build a tent even. They won't budge me. Give me the realistic answer. What would you do? And I'll tell you what you would do. You would find channels like this one or other ones, or you'd post on Facebook bitching and moaning about it, and that's it. You would complain, and the elites would laugh at that if they ever even saw it, which they wouldn't, and they don't care. And that's the extent of it. And then you drive by that data center on your way to work every day, cussing under your breath about how it should have never been built, finding some way to blame Democrats for it, because you wouldn't want to. Most people wouldn't want to accept this is happening under a Republican administration. I hate that that's happening, but it's true. And that's the extent of that. You drive by it, you would complain, you would bring your kids with you one day while you're driving, and you'd show them that and say, "See that? Used to be farmland, now it's a data center." And we all rose up and tried to stop it, and they built it anyway. And that's it. And then you would die, and then your kids would wonder why the fuck the data center is there, and why they're an enslaved worker to it. Data centers are at the bottom of my list. They shouldn't be. They shouldn't be. They're a massive problem. The devil has done his best work through Republicans. Well, he's done his best work through our American political system. Because then with the Democrats, you have open borders, immigration, and you have all of these third world scum entering into our country, which fulfills the Zionist agenda as well. The Zionists use both parties. They hijacked the conservative movement and turned it into the neoconservative movement. I referenced Bill Kristol earlier today. Look him up sometime. He was the mentor for Tom Cotton, who's pushing for Section 622 of the Senate Intelligence Integration Act that will combine the CIA and Mossad together and make it illegal to restrict intelligence to Israel. And neoconservatism, the hijacked movement that it is, has become a Zionist movement that is now used to drain America of blood and treasure in foreign affairs. Meanwhile, the liberal side of the aisle is the useful tool and weapon of Zionism on the domestic front. And that's why we see the open borders immigration, because ultimately the Zionists consider Europe and Europeans to be their greatest threat. And open borders solves that problem with higher crime, interbreeding, mixed races, etc. And this sounds racist because it kind of is, but it's not coming from me, it's coming from the Zionist agenda. And we've seen it played out time and time again, and it's happening right now, like Adam Onik has referenced, Ireland, which is rising up against it, Britain, which is rising up against it, France is starting to rise up against it, it's happening in Germany, it's happening in Italy, and it's happening here. And this is what they do. They win on both fronts. Both sides carry out their agenda to varying different degrees. And that's why AIPAC funds both sides of the aisle. They actually fund more Democrats than they do Republicans. AIPAC funds 58.6% of Democrats and 46, I believe is what it is, or 44 point something percent of Republicans. They do fund both. It's pretty even, but it is more Democrats. And American Jews vote 70 to 80% Democrat. So yeah, the devil does his best work through both sides, is really the truth. And I'm not trying to be a fence sitter. I'm just saying you have to look at it correctly. You have to understand the full picture to know that. Because a lot of Democrats will come in here in my chat and they'll say, "Oh, I like that this guy's speaking the truth." And then the second I'll say that and I'll say, "Yeah, and open borders immigration is a liberal policy used by Zionists," they get pissed and they don't understand. Because they think that their party is anti-Zionist and anti-Israel government regime. And it is, but not for the complete right reasons. They view Israel as this extension of, the Republican American vision of colonizing other countries. And it's like, that's like 5% of it. There's so much more to the story. And they don't realize that their own party is the ultimate weapon of Zionism as well. They think it's just the neoconservatives. It's not. They play both sides of the field very effectively. Yeah, exactly. Stay true. Two wings on the same all-seeing eye bird. Yeah, Palantir. Palantir. America is so divided, close to a civil war possible. No, I don't know, Michael Cox. I don't think so. I hate to talk down about Americans in this way, but like I said, it's like if America goes out with a whimper rather than with explosions and violence, it's because Americans are too comfortable. So all we choose to do is bitch and moan on the internet. So civil war, from where? Who starts it? Why does it start? Where does it happen? Who are the leaders in it? I don't see it. I literally do not see that. Not at all. But I understand the concern. That's for sure. It does. We are more divided than ever. That much is true. Lifeguard said, I can see. I don't even mean to jump the gun on the response, lifeguard, but I'm totally on board with you, man. I used to say the same. I actually hate the saying. Lifeguard says, I used to think two wings of the same bird was bullshit. I don't anymore. I used to hate that because I used to think it's a fake. It's like, and I don't mean woke in like the liberal transgender gay woke shit. I mean like, I just think it was like a fake enlightened stance where it's like, it's coincided with like, well, voting doesn't matter anyway. And it's just two wings on the same bird. And it's like, I used to think that too, and I used to hate the saying for that reason. But the more you educate yourself on this, the more you realize it's true to a large degree. Now, morally, there are stark differences, which is why I am a conservative still. You know, I can say all these things like you study the history of all of this, and then you understand, you I don't say sympathize so much, but you all of a sudden find yourself not thinking the Antichrist will be some Muslim jihadist, and you start to almost recognize the plight of the Muslims, and then you start to view them in a different light. All of a sudden, they're not the impending doom biggest threat to the world anymore. You see them for what they are, and then you actually connect some dots, and you realize, every interaction I've had in person with a Muslim has actually been pretty pleasant in my state. I'm not saying that's the case everywhere. There's Dearborn, Michigan. I have a whole playlist devoted to the problems of Muslim colonization in America, actually. And we always have to remember that. But one on one, Muslim people, they're pretty funny. I actually get along with them very good, one on one. And then I think, I used to be an Uber driver, and I used to pick up from the Jewish community centers, and they were wearing the braids, and they were wearing the get up, and I used to think to myself, they were some of the most rude, nonverbal, non communicative, condescending people I've ever dealt with. And I used to think, wow, what a I remember thinking this as an Uber, this was years ago, and I remember thinking this, wow, what a fluke that I've only ever gotten the rude Jews. How could God's chosen people be so rude? And it's so true. It's so true. Now, again, you look at Dearborn, Michigan, and you recognize that probably with any group of people, assimilation is mandatory. Because the reason why I've had good interactions with Muslims is because in my town, they're not a majority or even close to it. And so they have to assimilate somewhat. And they are pleasant people as a result overall. Meanwhile, with the Jewish community people, you don't see them anywhere, by the way. That's something else I always point out. I know where their community centers are, and I'll see them in the kosher section at my grocery store. And that's it. I don't see them anywhere. That being said, the assimilation is the key. And so in Dearborn, Michigan, there's a 52% Muslim population, and now you see the consequences of that. The loudspeakers outside their mosques, and the white women being spit on and having rocks thrown at them for not wearing a burqa while they're out in public. And it's like, that's unacceptable. And that's the reminder that, yes, there are still major cultural differences. And in my opinion, probably the Islamic religion is, well, I would say definitely not actually compatible in the West. As pleasant as they are individually, and as much as I like some of them, I would even reach out and try to, if we were in a position where we were like they all got to go, I'd be like, no, not my boy, this. Like, I know a few of them, and I'm like, these are good people. But there is a dark truth to that in both cases. So I'm not here to sympathize with either side too much. I'm just here to say that, the more your eyes are opened to our occupied government and the truth that's happening in the Middle East, what's behind all of this, the policies, etc., your viewpoints on everything change. Your viewpoints on everything change. The evangelical churches in the West, I am disgusted by them. The previous stance that's been indoctrinated into us about the Muslims, I don't think it's as big of a deal as I used to. I mean, if you would have asked me when I was in like 10th grade, I would have literally said they're going to take over the world, the Muslims, and they're going to usher in the Antichrist. What an idiot I was. But I didn't know any better. I was being indoctrinated. I didn't know. So yeah, things change. Things change when you see the truth. That's for sure. Your perspective levels out to a degree, and then you see things for what they are. And it's actually kind of helpful. It's actually very helpful. It's how I've made very accurate political predictions on this channel, because once you recognize who's driving the train and why it's happening, it actually gets almost boring to some degree. There's like less surprises and far less emotion behind all of it. I'm no longer like I'm full of righteous indignation, I would say, for sure, and it burns it within me. But when I see some news stories, when I read about Section 224 of the NDAA, of Israel integrating all of their shit into our military now, and Section 622 where they want to blend in the CIA and Mossad and make it illegal to restrict our own intelligence with Israel, I don't like scream in anger, or like I'm not even caught off guard by it anymore. So it's helpful in that way too, because it's not surprising. Adam Monica says America first is not enough. Yeah, true. America only. The religion. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's definitely they're incompatible. Just like Jefferson warned. That said, they're only the symptom. Yeah, or more accurately, they're described as the broomstick. They are like the tool that's always used to manufacture and create the outrage that they thrive and capitalize off of. After all, if they're not victims, then they have no power. That's why the NAACP was also funded by several of them and backed by them. And I think continues to be supported with their money to this day, because it does go back to that whole victim status thing, right? If slavery doesn't make a certain group of people a victim, then what are they? And if World War II wasn't such a catastrophe and disaster and didn't make them the victims they claim that they are, then what are they? And if the Muslims aren't a constant threat to the world, then who else would we focus on instead? So yes, completely true. They are the symptom, they're the broomstick. Shavila says, those real patriots you're talking about was a treasonous insurrection. Who are you talking about? I'm not sure what you're talking about, though. Shavila. Good to see you back here, though, Shavila. I'm starting to recognize your username. Appreciate you tuning in consistently. Russell says, look at Ireland. Hey, you're wrong. That's Ireland, not America. Sadly, that's actually my point. You made my point for me. That's Ireland, literally not America. Where's that happening in America? Nowhere. And it probably should be. Over the Epstein files, over the occupation of our government, over all of this. And it's not happening. It's still too comfortable here. Spartacus says, I had a guy like that bugged in front of me at a gas station. Rude as hell. I live in Minnesota, and I haven't ever had a Muslim or a Somalian do that to me. Yeah. Yeah. Again, this is not to, but still, exactly right, Spartacus. Exactly true in that regard. There is a difference. Pamela says, I've known some lovely Jewish people. Yeah, well, listen, so have I. I'm actually not saying that. But there are Jewish people who are like American Jews. And I know them too. And they're some of them are funny. They listen, the stereotype about them being smart is true. On average, they're very smart people, and they can actually give you a lot of good advice in regards to that. And it's actually kind of funny how creatively they can think up loopholes to solve your problems. That's why there's the stereotype of them being lawyers, right? This is true. You can observe this as fact the longer you live. But American Jews are different. I'm talking about picking up from the community center. These were practicing, in many cases they were rabbinic, and that's what I'm talking about. And whereas what I'm basically trying to explain to you is, whereas I will walk out and I don't like burqas in America. I think we should outlaw them, for the record. Nevertheless, that's not the case right now. So when I go to the grocery store and I see a woman in a burqa with her husband by her side, and I've had to interact with them, they're pleasant people, is all I'm saying. They've been, I haven't had a bad incident with them. And with American Jews who are wearing regular everyday clothes and they own businesses and they pay their taxes, I've known plenty of decent ones too. But when I've had to pick up, in contrast to the burqa wearing Muslim, when I've had to deal with or pick up a person from the Jewish community center who's in full rabbinic garb with the two braids and the big hat or the little hat or whatever it is, they have been anything but pleasant people. You get literally the vibe from them that they view you as the goy. Like, I've tried talking with them before when I was an Uber driver, and literally the vibe was, why are you interacting with me, you goyim scum? Just take me to my destination and don't expect a tip. and that's how it played out. And I'm just being honest with you. That's a subjective experience, but I'm just saying. But yeah, there's a difference because American Jews are different. They're more apathetic to all of that because they were born here or whatever. And so there is a difference. And I'm not saying it's every Jew. That's important, I guess, to put claimer-wise up there. Yeah, Selena girl, the Hasidic ones, those are even worse. The Hasidic ones literally believe the difference between just a regular rabbinic Jew who might already be pretty rude and a Hasidic Jew. The Hasidic Jews literally believe that if they spend too much time around the goyim, they will become the goyim. So they literally think the longer they interact with you or are in your presence, the proverbial dirtier they get and less intelligent they become. I'm not even kidding. That's the Hasidic Judaist branch. They literally believe that. So yeah, and for that reason, I don't think I've ever run into one. You want the government to control what citizens wear. Oh, so you are an enemy of liberty. Good to know, says Tube Foolery. Yes, I do actually want the government to control what citizens. Actually, what I want for them to control what they can't wear, which is a burqa, which covers their entire body and almost all of their face. Yes, I do. I don't want that allowed in America at all. Will Trump get bored without a war? I don't know. We'll see. That's a good question, Kathy Morgan. It would be nice if he could recognize he wouldn't get bored by just focusing on our economy, which isn't doing so well. You know what would be entertaining to Trump? If he could figure out this housing market crisis, this massive, ridiculous, unattainable housing market. You know what would be cool is Trump could figure that out. He could go to Bill Pulte and say, "Hey, let's work on the housing market for the youth. The future generations of America." Wouldn't that be nice? He wouldn't be bored then because that's quite a task that is technically at his feet, but he's ignoring it because of the foreign war. Like, there's a lot of problems Trump needs to focus on domestically here in America that would keep him very thoroughly busy and entertained if he chose to focus on them. Selena Girl says, "I believe Paris banned the burqa." Yeah, yeah. Well, because Paris has been overrun there, so they've identified the problems with it. Michael Cox says, "Build 200 oil refineries." Send 3 years to Dagestan and forget. That's a hilarious meme. Yeah, Pamela says it too. I think France outlawed the burqa. Yeah, they had to. It was becoming a massive problem. And that's what I mean, by the way. By the way, tube foolery. You know what the real answer is? So that we don't have to worry about a tyrannical government deciding what people can wear? The real answer is we shut down immigration altogether for 20, 30, or 40 years, and we don't allow any people from third world countries into our country anymore. And then we don't have to worry about what they're wearing because they're not living here anymore. That's actually the real answer for you. And that's ultimately what my belief is. I'll leave it off there, though, guys. It's getting so late. I got to get going. Appreciate all you guys for tuning in tonight. Be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screen. Hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do, and it helps encourage the YouTube algorithm to push this show out to more people. Also, be sure to subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. I go live every single night, Sunday through Friday, and Saturdays oftentimes too, usually around 10 p.m. Eastern, sometimes an hour later than that. Be on the lookout. Turn on post notifications when you subscribe so you're notified every time I go live. And then in addition to that, one more final thing I'll leave you guys off with here. Be on the lookout as well. If you really are liking the channel, I know some people have expressed interest in the possibility of this in the future. I will be developing the membership program, the monthly membership program on this channel. It will come with two different tiers. One will be $4.99 a month, the other will be $7.99 a month. And each tier will offer various different rewards for being a member of. Like, for instance, members only YouTube shorts, members only live streams, members only videos, priority response to chats, shout outs, members only polling on my community tabs page, members only status updates, etc. I'm working on it right now. But I am getting ready to implement that. I said I would do it when this channel crossed the 5,000 subscriber mark, which we were close to before I went live tonight. Either we're closer to it or we hit over that tonight. We'll see. But either way, I'm going to do that. You'll get emojis that you can use. And again, it's going to be just a way to get a lot more content. Within the membership program, I'll be probably creating very specific members-only videos that will really dive deep into what my political beliefs are, what my vision for the Conservative Party is, what any sort of good future conservative movement would stand for. And then I think for two, I would do members-only YouTube shorts, because YouTube allows them to now be possibly 3 minutes long. And what I could do with that, I had a vision of for tier 2 members, would be you could get multiple YouTube short updates throughout the week based off of various different topics where I could give my opinion on that for up to 3 minutes, sort of like a midday update about topics that I maybe don't discuss well live, etc. So I do have kind of a vision forming on it. Just be on the lookout for it, though, is what I have to say. Other than that, though, guys, I did hit 5,000. Nice, Spartacus. That's awesome. So I'll get to work on that membership program. That'll be implemented sometime this week. Be on the lookout for that. I'll announce it when it's ready. But other than that, appreciate all you guys. Thank you, Michael Cox, for the super chat tariff, as always. Thank you to all my regular viewers, new viewers, subscribers, likers of the stream, etc. Appreciate all you guys. Be sure to check out my regular long form videos as well. But other than that, have a great rest of your evening. Glory to America. God bless the USA, and may God bless all of you as well. Take care.